Hello and welcome to Threads of Fate. I am your host, Kira Ryberg, and today we are joined by the astrologer, the storyteller, the 12th house specialist, the wonderful Joe O'Neill. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. As you may have guessed from the title of this episode, from the introduction I just gave, we're going to talk about the 12th house today. And there is no one better equipped to talk about the 12th house than Joe. You've been specializing in the 12th house for how long now? Because I feel like it's been as long as I've been aware of you, pretty much.
Yeah, it's been 4 years. It's really been since 2021. And even before that, like my practice, like I somehow just got all the 12th housers coming to me. And we always ended up talking about the 12th house a lot in consults. But like officially, early 2021 was when I started like really owning it.
Amazing. And if you haven't had a 12th house reading with Joe, I highly, highly recommend. It was one of the best readings I've ever had in my life. And it just makes me that much more excited to sit here and talk about all of the different significations of the 12th house. And is it really that bad, Joe? What do you think?
Oh my God. That's literally the top question that I get. Even folks who come to me just for like timing or like natal readings or whatever. Usually people will be like, oh yeah, the 12th house, you specialize in that. Is it really as bad as they say? And like, first of all, that's a really good question. That's a really valid question. And the answer, unfortunately, is yes, it is that bad. Like the bad, scary, like especially super traditional significations of the 12th house are accurate. Those things are true about the 12th house. It does reflect things in life that are unpleasant, that are hard to deal with, etc. But also, there are ways that you can engage with 12th house themes that are not the literal worst all the time. And I do think there are also good things about the 12th house. So yes, it is that bad, but it's also more than that. That's the shortest answer that I could give.
No, that's perfect. And I think it's so true, and I feel like a lot of times people come to astrology because they want validation, they want hope, and then sometimes you have to talk about things that just aren't that easy. And astrology is going to speak to all of life, and all of life is not easy. And there are things that we experience that suck and that are hard. And the 12th
Yeah.
house is a place where we find a lot of those things, right? Like it is loss, it is fear, it is self-undoing, and it is a part of the chart that is just darker and harder. And that doesn't mean that there can't be light that we find in the dark, but I think there's still this quality of feeling like, oh shit, I just got thrown into this dark place. I don't really know how to get out of here. And now I have to face all of the scary ghosts that are in the corners. And that can feel both haunting and terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's such a key component of like why the 12th house can suck so bad is like I think most of us experience the 12th house or like what I would call a 12th house mental state against our will. Like it's not like we're like I'm gonna like go enter the 12th house now. It's usually like we've experienced loss or we're going through a really really hard time and we just kind of like find ourselves like sucked into this place where we do feel very isolated and disconnected and lonely and we're like feeling the heaviness of life and all that has happened and it doesn't feel usually we want to get out of that place like it's not
Yeah,
a fun
you don't
place to
want to
be.
hang out there.
No, not at all. And so it's like, I think a huge part of people's like real life 12th house experience is like them being like, I didn't choose this. I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to be experiencing these things. And then, of course, like I do think a lot of things that we don't necessarily like to think about or face about ourselves are kind of in that 12th house part of our chart. And so coming
Mhm.
face to face with those things, especially if you're like, I was not, shadow work was not like on my bingo card for this week then it sucks. Like it's just really difficult. Which, that's why I feel like it's so important to learn about the 12th house so you can engage with it intentionally. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean it will never suck again, but it does give you a little bit more agency in the process, which really does help a ton. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I always think about the perfection years and how you go from like the 11th house of friendship and the joy of Jupiter. And it's all happy. I mean, depending on your 11th house, but it's
Right.
community oriented. It's active. I know some of us have malefic ruled 11th houses. Hi. But for the most part, it's a social area. There's a lot more joy and levity that lives there. And so you're doing all of this for a whole year, and then you're tossed into your 12th house perfection year. Most notably at 23 tends to be the one that we focus on the most. And then it's like, wait, I was just having like a grand old time with my friends, like doing a bunch of fun things and not really caring about, responsibility and all of this. This is before your Saturn return hits. And
Yep.
then you're like tossed into the dark. And I often call the 12th house the cocoon. And it's like before you were like the bumbling little caterpillar, beep boop bopping around, going here, going there, having fun. And then all of a sudden someone throws you in this thing and like, you're changing, you're dealing with stuff. It's dark. You have no clue what's happening here for reasons that we will talk about. And it's like there's this tenderness and this rawness of that experience, but it's also visceral. Like you're completely shifting. And I think the way that we use transformation and like the word transformation and and astrology and spirituality communities, it's a little bit overdone. And I also think that when you go into the 12th house, you do transform. And it's also
100%.
oftentimes it's not an easy transformation, but it is one that like brings you into that first house here. And then all of a sudden you're a butterfly and you got to learn how to use these new wings. And it's this whole new experience going around the zodiac. But you didn't get there without going into like the deepest, darkest depths of your soul and facing these 12th house experiences. And I think that's the only way that you get to the other side, but you still have to you have to go through it to get through it kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, this is making me think of like one of the core things about the 12th house, which like it's a liminal space. And like that liminal sounds so, the word sounds so ethereal and like magical, mystical, and like honestly kind of like intriguing and appealing. And it can be, but also liminal as in like the goo of the cocoon, like your goo
Yeah.
in there, you do not know which way is up. Like it is disorienting. It can be just straight up scary because it's like fear of the unknown. You do not know
Mhm.
what's happening, and it's very tough to find reference points in a liminal place. It's like the Bermuda Triangle of the chart a little bit, where it's just like your compass does not work right. Like your normal navigation is not going to work the same. And yeah, it's yeah, transformation as in you're terrified, but it is
Yeah.
worth it, and there is a result at the end. But inside that moment, it's liminal as fuck.
Yeah, and I think the liminality, part of the reason it's liminal is because it's a cadent house, and
Hmm.
different types of, different houses are either angular, they're succedent, they're cadent. So the 12th house, the third house, the sixth house, the ninth house, for those who don't know, are all the cadent houses, and they all share a quality that is metacosmios, which means you are in between worlds. Sometimes those worlds are a lot more supportive, like you can be in between worlds in the ninth house hanging out with God and the divine and spirits and like having a lovely time. Or you can be in between worlds in the 12th where you literally feel so disconnected from yourself, right? Which we see through the aversion to the first. So that liminality, it's not as easy as it is in other parts of the chart. And I think that's part of the reason that goo, that compass not working, it feels scary because there isn't any other touch points. It's just like, oh my God, I'm not here. I'm not there. Am I anywhere? Question mark.
Am I anywhere? Question mark is so 12th house. Yes, exactly. And like, as far as like I think we can list like 12th house significations all day long, but a huge way that we can actually start to wrap our minds around the 12th house is like understanding why those significations are those significations. Like, why does the 12th house mean this stuff? And you mentioned the cadent nature of the 12th, which is huge, and
Mhm.
also the aversion. Because as you mentioned, like the ninth and third houses are also cadent houses. They're more background oriented. They're less in the foreground, whereas we could say like the angular houses are very much the foreground of our lives, the
Yes.
very visible, very legible parts of our lives. But the aversion plus the cadency, it hits so different. The ninth and 12th house are not the same. Like the third and 12th house are not the same. And aversion, when you look at the actual like definition of aversion, it sounds 12th housey. It's like the two places, so two signs, houses, planets, whatever, that are in aversion aren't making an aspect to each other. That's essentially the
Mhm.
definition of aversion. And it's described as those two things being estranged or alienated from each other. And it's like, where you start to feel it's the same vibe. It's the same vibe. And because the 12th house is adjacent to the first house and in aversion to the first, it occupies this really like unique position of, because any house in the chart is in aversion to what, four others at any
Mhm.
given time, like the two on either side and then the two kind of like across the way. But the first house, because it represents you, the person, and so much of how you move through the world and how you show up in the world, your kind of core priorities and motivations, all of that stuff. This 12th house that is in aversion to it, yet so close to it, um, it's the contrast between the first and 12th houses, like how do I describe this? It's like a jarring kind of thing. And so it's like there's the cadency, but then there's also this dark house nature of the aversion of the 12th house that really I'm struggling with my words here.
No,
Maybe you
you're
can help
fine.
me.
Yeah, for sure.
I lost the thread. I went
No,
too
you're
far into the
so
12th
fine.
house.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's probably going to happen many times as we chat. But no, I think it's like that aversion, right? I think of the first house as all of the things you described, and also it's life. It is pneuma, it is breath,
Yes.
it is spirit, it is vitality. So all of the houses that are averse to that are inherently not supportive of the life force.
Right.
So when you have the aversion there, it's like now all of a sudden there's this dark stuff. It's connected to what's happening in the first, but you
Yes.
can't see it and it's not good for you. Like it's actually like things that can hurt you and harm you and bring you into places where you don't have that same visibility or clarity on your life direction, on your core principles, on your self-image, on those first house themes because you're so stuck in the muck of it. But it's like what is happening there is directly related to the first house stuff because it's neighboring it. And
Hmm.
also, it's dark and it's cadent and it's averse, and that makes it inherently harder to engage with. And that's how we start getting a lot of these different significations like fears, like grief, like loss, like isolation, exile, right? All of those things are 12th house significations, and none of those things are really supportive to the life force. When you're grieving, you're usually just like completely beside yourself. You're not thinking about, oh, I need to go to work, I need to do this, right? Like you are lost in a puddle of pain. When you are in exile, whether literally or because you are fleeing a country that you are not welcome in anymore, or because you are escaping persecution, it's not a good time, not supportive to the life force, right? The stress, the pain, the difficulty, the separation that comes from that. Those are 12th house experiences. And so we can see the ways in which it can bring you to a different place by going into the 12th. You have to move through your grief instead of becoming lost in it. You have to flee the country to find safety. But that experience, that liminal place, when you're in it, hard, hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Extremely hard.
Hmm.
Subjectively unpleasant experience for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, I think some people can have nicer 12th house situations. Obviously, if you have a benefic in or ruling the 12th, like your experience of this place is going to be softer, but it doesn't mean that you get away from these themes, right? Like there's still
Totally.
going to be this encounter with the 12th house. And I'm curious, one of the things when I was thinking about chatting with you that I really wanted your opinion on is they say, in these ancient texts that we often refer back to, that when a benefic rules or is placed in the 12th house, that it becomes a functional malefic. Do you agree or disagree? Tell me your thoughts because I really want to know what you think about this.
Yeah, this is I do think it's a real thing. I do think it's a
Okay.
real thing. I've also heard the term like tell me if this is you are much more I feel like your kind of like reference points to like the source texts are much more robust than mine. I've also heard that this term like accidental malefic, is that the a similar
Yeah.
term or is that a
Yeah,
different
same,
term?
same, same, I think. Like functional
Gotcha.
malefic, accidental malefic. Like it's like they didn't they're not a malefic, but they kind of become one by virtue of what they are responsible for in the chart.
Right, right. Yeah, I do think that's a thing. And you know, I can use my chart as sort of an example. I have the moon in Cancer in the 12th house, and the moon isn't necessarily a benefic, but it's strong by sign. And
Hmm.
so there's this interesting combination where it's like, I have a strong moon. My moon is good at moon things, but what my moon is responsible for in my chart is 12th house things. So it's like my moon is really good at giving me 12th house experiences. And it's like, how good, air quotes, is that? It's really not great a lot of the time, but there are good things about it. And I think one thing that I notice so much with the 12th house is that it's just really slippery. So even if you have some buffers there, like a benefic in or ruling the 12th, the last thing I want is for anyone to feel like hard on themselves because they're like, oh, I just have this like really nice benefic in the 12th, but it's like I can't figure out how to make it like good for me.
Hmm.
It is a functional malefic. It's going to be good at bringing you 12th house experiences. And that does include the grief, the loss, the isolation, all of those things that do not feel good to you. I do think there is potential there, though.
Yeah.
Again, kind of depending on how you engage the 12th house themes when they're not engaging you, which just will happen. But to answer your question, yeah, the functional malefic thing is real. And it kind of the same answer to the question, like, is the 12th house really that bad? Yes. And also, there's more to it than that.
Yeah, I feel like the one way that I see this working out is often with Jupiter. And I think because there is kind of a spiritual quality to the 12th house. And I think by virtue of the square that it makes to the ninth, right, that the house of God like has an overwhelming influence on the 12th house, these types of things. But I always see clients who have Jupiter in the 12th house, like they go on silent meditation retreats, they go to
Yes.
ashrams, like they love to solo travel. They really, really value their alone time. They find wisdom and meaning in isolation and in silence and in solitude. And so I feel like there are ways that it can be beneficial, especially like you said, if you are engaging with the 12th house in a bit more of an intentional way instead of letting it, and not even letting it is not the right way to say it, because sometimes
Right.
life is just life and it's going to happen regardless. But when it is engaging with you, how do you see the more benefic expressions of 12th house experiences come through? Because I'm sure we're going to talk about a lot of the malefic ones. So let's give people like a whisper, a gleaming whisper of potential hope for planets in and moving through the 12th.
Yeah, well, you had some really great examples for like Jupiter in the 12th, like
Mhm.
folks who love solo travel. That's a huge one. The 12th as a cadent house is movement oriented.
Yeah.
It's actually you know our sweet friend Meg Kane. We are besties and we leave each other like podcast length voice notes. And so much of
I
the time
also
we
receive those from them,
Yes,
luckily.
yes. Um, I know it's what a great fortune, genuinely. But the reason I bring this up is because we're often doing that from the car. And we've talked about how like the car itself is such a like liminal 12th house space. Like you're not in there long term. You're going between places. You're alone a lot of the time.
Hmm.
Um, but yes, so back to kind of benefic things that can happen with the 12th house. Solo travel is a big one. Something like a silent meditation retreat is very, very 12th house. There are some kind of modern significations of the 12th that we see, such as meditation, like intuition, like these transcendent experiences. Um, some of which I think are a little bit due to like the Pisces Neptune conflation we see from the alphabet method, but
Hmm.
some of them are pretty real though. Like going into a very intentionally kind of like liminal space, whether that is meditation or trance work, is very 12th house. Um, there's also, there's like the really scary 12th house significations. There's like the kind of better ones. And then there's just like the neutral ones, like alone time or like
Hmm.
privacy. And that is such a huge 12th house thing. Like if you have planets in the 12th house, you need more alone time. Or if you have a
Yeah.
prominent 12th house ruler, you just do. And having that feeling of solitude, which is different from isolation. If like isolation is like disconnection from others and solitude is
Hmm.
like connection to yourself. That's the way I
Ooh,
think of it at least.
love that. That's really
And
good.
Yeah, so if you can access that solitude, that can really help bring you back to your center and kind of like tune out the noise of life and help
Hmm.
to rejuvenate you and kind of like refill your energy, especially if you've been doing like a lot of social expenditure or like you've just been really fucking busy, you know? Like
Yeah.
that is what the 12th house is so good for. It's just like going inside to a quiet place where it's just you and yourself and nothing else, where you can recuperate. Um, I think there's also a lot of like imaginal potential in the 12th house. Like it is because it is so like mystical, liminal, magical. It does, really things like trance work and like imaginal journeying and that kind of stuff. That's a good way to engage with 12th house themes because it is kind of a wild place and it's kind of like speaking the 12th house's language if you approach it
Mm.
with some of these kind of mental frameworks. But yeah, those are the things that come to mind immediately.
No, I love that. I feel like there is that liminal quality that can be beneficial, in the ways that you just
Hmm.
described. And I always say, like, the 12th house too is really good for getting away from the hustle and bustle of daily life. Like,
For
when
sure.
you have been doing the thing all day long and you just need to retreat, you retreat to the 12th house a lot of the time. And
Yes.
that can be a way that you recharge, especially if you are someone who has prominent 12th house stuff in your chart. But I also think what you were saying about needing to be alone, but also I feel like there is a visibility thing that happens with the 12th house too, where you don't want to be seen. And, oftentimes people who have like the ruler of the 10th in the 12th house, like have a very interesting relationship with having to do visible public work and also wanting to operate from behind the scenes, not wanting their name out there, having a lot of fears around. And sometimes those fears are very founded based on experiences that they have, right? But like not wanting to put your name out there. Like I always see people who do this and they like operate under a pseudonym online and they have like a
Yes.
different avatar, for their profile pic and stuff like that because there is a quality where that the thing that makes you the most visible, the ruler of your 10th being in the 12th is just like don't perceive me. And if you do, oh my God, I might combust. Do you
Yes.
feel like that is also something that you see in your work?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like if we could say that like the 10th house is about visibility, like the 12th house is about invisibility, like straight up.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's like
Mm-hmm.
hidden things in general or like your own relationship with your visibility, yes, the 12th house will absolutely complicate that. The behind the scenes thing is another one of those things where it's like, I think net neutral. Like some people
Mm-hmm.
just prefer to do behind the scenes work and it's kind of that simple. But yeah, at most it can be like really complex and like really challenging because there's, especially if there are other configurations in the chart that like really emphasize the 10th house, the midheaven, the role of visibility in your life direction. But then there's also a 12th house connection. You've got a really big puzzle there of how do you manage that? How do
Mm-hmm.
you balance that? How do you honor the 12th house connection there, whatever that placement is, like ruler of the midheaven or 10th and the 12th. How do you honor that by not like putting yourself in these visible places in a way that like it can make that 12th house planet feel so raw and it can like
Uh-huh.
really take a toll on you mentally, emotionally, energetically, I think, too,
Yeah.
to kind of force yourself into that visibility. But then it also becomes about like, how do you honor the parts of your chart that are really calling for your participation and visibility in life? It's like, can be so interesting for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. And it's like you kind of need a barrier between you and the visibility in some ways, which is
For
why, and I think
sure.
a lot of that is for energetic emotional protection. Like it's not even, oh, it's because of this reason, or, because I have a situation where someone can't know my name. It's like, no, I need a boundary between self and public self. So I have something that's just for me behind these closed walls that is so integral to my identity. I see this with 12th house sons all of the time, is like that really strong need for separation. And I feel like that is where something like a pseudonym is kind of like the antidote to many of these 12th house, especially 10th house, crossover qualms is like, yeah, be you in a way that isn't totally and wholly you. It's still of you, it's still authentic, but it's not going to feel so exposing to that 12th house planet in a way that is going to make them want to just go right back into the 12th house. I think it's like a nice way to strike that balance. But I know in your work, one of the really cool things that I love that you talk about with the 12th house, first house kind of conundrum and why it makes the 12th so hard is both the modality and the element. And I want you to riff on that if you can for like, or just tell the people what your theory is on this, because I remember listening to your 12th house talk. Go get the talk if you guys haven't already somehow witnessed it because it's brilliant. But it was one of the things like, it almost feels like a really basic astrological principle, but you brought it to life in a way where I was like, oh my God, this is making me go so much deeper. Not even just the relationship between the 12th and the first, but you could apply it to so many other parts of the chart. So tell me about that and in specific, relating it back to the 12th.
Yes. Okay. Yes. I think this is where my brain was trying to take me earlier. So I'm
Oh,
ready.
good.
I'm ready this time.
We circled back.
Yeah, we're circled back. I'm not going to get lost on the 12th house this time. Fingers crossed. No promises. But yes. Okay. So one really cool thing about aversion in general, whether it's aversion between two adjacent signs side by side or signs that are 150 degrees apart, is that they don't share anything in common by element or modality or planetary ruler. The exception is Aquarius and Capricorn, obviously, are both ruled by Saturn.
He's special. Or
Of course, we're special.
Saturn, the
Of
one who rejoices
course,
here.
exactly, which we should talk about that too.
We
But in
will.
general, for any first and 12th house combination, except for Aquarius rising, we have nothing in common between 12th and first house signs by element, mode, or ruler. So what we have is a lot of contrast there. And because the anchor point, if you will, is the ascendant, the first house that represents you and life and how you show up in it and move through it, all of that stuff. The 12th house sign, even just by element and modality, which to be fair, these are really basic basics. Like these are some of the first things you learn in astrology.
Hmm.
But if you just start to look at that contrast and start to think about it in terms of like, you know, I'll use my chart as an example again, just because I'm closest and I have my
I love
consent.
your Leo rising.
What can I say, honestly? So I have Leo rising, so I have a fixed fire sign rising. I have fixed fire priorities. Like personal freedom is very important to me. I tend to be independent and really prioritize my independence in this very fiery way. I'm also a very fixed person. Like I really like to be able to rely on things. I like to kind of be in control of things, I will admit. And so then in my Cancer 12th house, I have a water sign in the 12th and a cardinal sign in the 12th. And so because so much priority and emphasis is placed on that angular Leo first house, the fire element and the fixed modality, the 12th house sign, Cancer, water, cardinal, also a lunar thing, it feels a little bit uncomfortable to me at a baseline because
Hmm.
that contrast, it's almost like the cancer of it all, those differences can feel sometimes like a threat to those first house priorities.
It's
And I have seen
jarring.
this, yeah, because, you know, water is a lot more fluid. There is more softness. It feels to me, to my Leo first house, as way too vulnerable, way too tender. I think at worst, when I'm in my like real like worst capitalist brainworm moments, I'm like, oh, it's so weak and like it's too soft and this, which is like there's problems. I know the problems. But the point is that contrast can put the 12th house sign by element and modality in this place of feeling uncomfortable at least and like dangerous at worst. Like it
Yeah.
might actually be a real problem if you were to embody those signs qualities. And this can kind of like tell us the shape of the general like 12th house experience, whether it's like what it feels like to be in that 12th house mental state, or like kind of give us a shape of the fears in general. And a good example of this would be like for mutable rising signs are always going to have a fixed 12th house. So like that mutability rising
Read
where
me,
it's like,
Joe. Read me.
I know, sorry, girl.
I'm ready.
uh, so mutable priorities are very much about like options and flexibility and being able to change your mind and pivot and do multiple things. And like there's a real element of like freedom to this and movement. And
Hmm.
when you just look at the modality of a fixed 12th house in comparison to that, so many mutable rising signs that I talk to are like, yeah, when I'm like in a 12th house mental state, I feel trapped. Like I feel confined. I feel fixed in the worst way, in a bad way, you know?
I do know.
And you, it's like, yes, yes. And this, you know, we could go through each and every modality, each and every element and kind of compare and contrast. And planetary ruler of the signs comes into play here as well. A really good example of this, I think, would be like Scorpio rising with a Libra 12th
Hmm.
house. There's like the fixed water of it all, which, you know, water does have to do with like feeling emotionally okay, like prioritizing like feel like an emotional felt sense of like things are going to be okay. Like I'm level in some way, emotionally regulated. That's a big priority. But when you add in the fixed modality and Mars ruling that, a lot of times for Scorpio risings, this looks like I want to be in control of as many variables as possible so I can
Hmm.
feel, because like emotional okayness to a Scorpio rising is often, you know, it's not about like comfort zone, fuzzy blanky, like it can be those things, but it's often there's a little bit of a sharper edge to it with Mars there.
Yeah.
And with the 12th house being Libra, you have an air sign in the 12th, and air versus water, you know, air introduces this more social element. Um, the cardinal element of, or the cardinal modality of the Libra 12th house is compared to fixed, it's about initiating something, it's about starting something new. And to fixed signs rising, that often feels like, you know, to start something new, that means something is ending. And endings are not super easy for fixed signs rising sometimes if we want to like really hold on to something. And then when you add in the planetary nature of the 12th house ruler, Venus, compared to Mars as ascendant ruler, first house ruler,
Hmm.
you when you put all this together, it's like, you know, Venus is the planet of love and connection and relationship. And that's a variable that you're never going to be able to control. Another person is a variable you cannot control. And so for Scorpio risings with this Libra 12th house, I see fears around relationship and friendship and love and connection a lot because it's like that Libra nature shapes the general fear of the 12th house. And so we get that Scorpio
Mm.
rising like, I'm just gonna, you know, I'm just gonna, if you want it done well, do it yourself. It's like that kind of vibe with Scorpio rising. It's like,
Totally.
you know, looking out for number one, holding people maybe a little at arm's length because there is that fear around those Libran things. And you can really break it down like this for like every single rising sign. But if you just look at element, modality, and planetary ruler, that will give you, that will start to give you an idea of what your 12th house is like as far as those fears and the general feeling of that place.
That's so good. And just as a quick little thing, you are working on a 12th house guidebook, are you not?
I am. I
Is
am
it going to
working
go
on it.
through all of this stuff for all of the signs?
It is. There will, in fact, be 12 guidebooks, one for each rising sign. So, yes, I'm doing a kind of like a 12th house 101 guidebook right now that really breaks this down for every single rising sign. There'll be an
Mm.
option to just get the guidebook for all the rising signs too, but there will be a breakdown in
That
writing. Yeah.
I just want to like thank you, Joe. So everyone, you keep your eye out for that because that is going to
Yeah.
be really, really helpful for understanding how this plays out in your chart. But I have a question for you that brought up for me. Do you feel like the modality then, if we're talking about the 12th house is kind of shaping the fears, right? Would you say that the fear then is around also like it's around starting things, would you for like fixed risings, like there's a fear towards initiation, and then for mutable risings, there's a fear around consistency. Like, was that, am I getting that right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I feel like that rings so true in the kind of like charts that I'm going through in my head and the people that I know in my own personal experience. And there's a way in which I think viewing the chart through this lens is so helpful because it does take those kind of like quote unquote basic things and brings them to life in a whole new way. Where if you were just looking at that and you could get so much information out of that that it's really going to shift the way that you understand everything in the chart. And I want to talk about the fear element a little bit because I think that is a big part of the 12th house. And we said we were going to come back to the fact that Saturn rejoices here, which means that, in the planetary joy schema, all planets have a part of the chart that they like to be in best. And they are such an old schema that they actually influence the meanings of the houses themselves. So part of the reason that we have a lot of the significations for the 12th house that we do are because of the aversion, because of the cadency, and also because Saturn rejoices here. So this is Saturn space. And I think when we consider what Saturn represents, toil, hardship, depression, misery, labor, you start understanding why the 12th house is not the most comfortable place and why it can bring you into those feelings of isolation and why, in the best case of Saturn, it's solitude and meditation. And also, it's still the things that tend to create barriers between you and either the outside world, you and other people, because Saturn is the boundary. And I'm curious, how do you kind of think about Saturn's rejoicing here and what that means for the 12th house?
Yeah, things start to really click when you start thinking about this. It's like, oh, things make sense because of course, like a planet rejoicing in a place doesn't mean me, the human, will rejoice about that planet being in that
Right.
place. It's very easy to like, the joy of Jupiter or Venus, the 11th house or the fifth house. Like these are places and planetary joys that are very like aligned with what is, feels good and joyful to us as people. But when we're talking about the joys of the malefics themselves are the ones that are like, yes, I'm with it. Like this is me. I feel so at home here. And that's important to remember with Saturn because like, of course Saturn would love this like isolated, disconnected place. Saturn's like, great, I can like read a tome for 100 years and like develop mastery, which like, of course Saturn loves that, but like that as human beings built for connection, that does not hit the same. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I mean, it's all the things you said. It really does speak to how 12th house things, you know, there is this barrier between when we're in a 12th house space between us and the world, us and like the light of day, it feels like
Hmm.
that does feel very Saturnian. And I think, one thing that I think about a lot and just encounter a lot in my 12th house work, I there aren't a ton of like just universal things I can say about the 12th house because, like everything, it really depends on your specific chart. But something that I do see so consistently is this idea of surrender, where at the end of the day, you're going to be scared of the things in the 12th house. It's not going to feel good. And you have to let go. You have to surrender. And it's not that one of Saturn's significations is surrender necessarily. I don't think that's true, but something feels Saturnian about this idea. It's like a feeling of inevitability, a feeling of like you have to
Mm.
accept what's here and accept the fear, accept how it doesn't feel good and just be with that. It's like, and I think so much of how Saturn is this Lord of Time. Saturn is like this planet that teaches us about like sitting like a stone and just being, even in the sense of like Saturn as idleness, that
Yeah.
is so resonant with the 12th house. Like you have to just enter this space, see what's there, accept it, and be with it. And it has that very heavy kind of Saturnian feeling of like, of fate there as well. And I'll stop there because I could probably ramble for a little bit, but that's what comes to mind for me really thinking about Saturn's joy in the 12th house.
Yeah, I feel like there's what was coming to mind when you were saying that was just like it's gonna take the time it's gonna take. And so you
Yes.
can act as like this force and try to resist it, or you can do the Saturn thing, get quiet, get still, and just be with the experience. And that's probably gonna generate as much ease as possible here rather than trying to fight fate or fight the 12th house because you can show up with your boxing gloves and it's still probably going to knock you out. So maybe going with the current is like a little bit of a better way to engage with the 12th house when you are getting thrown in there for one reason or another. And normally that's going to happen through different activations, whether it's a planet going through your 12th house by transit, or a perfection year, or getting activated by another timing technique, or, but there are all of these various ways that the 12th house can show up. And so if you think about it, there's no escape from it. And I think that's very Saturnian. We don't escape death.
Yes.
You know, it's like death
Yep.
comes for us all. And Saturn is the
Hmm.
planet of death and endings. And so some of what we, encounter in the 12th house is those things that we feel like we can't get away from, that we just have to face. And one of those is that we don't get away from ourselves and that a part of our psyche, of our inner psychology lives in the 12th house. And it's usually the parts that we don't want to face or that we don't want to look at or that really feel hard for us to say, this is part of me and own it. And I think that is also why the 12th house can feel so confronting because at the end of the day, Saturn is like oppository to the generative luminaries, right? The things that bring life into being and help us illuminate our understanding and self-concept and emotions and all of that. So Saturn is just darkness, it's heaviness. And that really feels like, oh, all of these things that I want to hide about myself. When you're in the 12th house, you don't really get to do that anymore. And I think that experience tends to be very confronting for people. And this is where we get one of those significations of self-undoing. And I think that there's a lot of, mm, it's hard to talk about, isn't it? Because no one really wants to talk about self-undoing. Ironic.
Yeah.
You mean we don't want to talk about the 12th house theme? That's hard to talk about? That's so weird.
Strange.
But sometimes we are our own worst enemies. Sometimes we do have to look at ourselves in the mirror and be like, "Ooh, that that part of me, I gotta work on that. Maybe I should go to therapy about it." Another 12th house thing, right? This kind of idea that there are parts of us that are not always wholly perfect and good and beautiful and easy. And in the 12th house, we meet those parts. And that can feel, I think, like a stripping back of the veneer that we present both to the world and to ourselves about who we are. And that's hard.
Yeah. It's it's really hard and that's so true. It's very stripped down. It's very like kind of ironically like no illusions once you're in
Hmm.
there in the 12th house with that stuff. And it's hard to confront yourself in that way, but I think it's so important also because it's like I do think that once you decide like I'm gonna like really turn inward and I'm like really gonna go into my interiority and face these parts of myself. A lot of times it's like what you find there are like so many layers of shame or guilt or embarrassment or even like especially like inherited narratives about why that part of you should not see the light of day. There's
Hmm.
so much you have to get through that is painful to encounter, but usually underneath all that, there is something that is maybe not quite so hard to accept. Like a lot of times it's very little tender parts of us where, maybe when we were very little kids, like certain behaviors or qualities like being super enthusiastic or very sensitive and emotional, there's usually unfortunately a time when a grown up will tell us like, hey, you gotta, it's time to grow up. It's time to be a big
Yeah.
girl or whatever it is. And I really believe that like those parts of us, those qualities, they're being told, hey, there's not a place for you in the visible world. And so they go into this 12th house place, and usually some shame comes along with it. These layers, again, of whether it's like what's culturally acceptable, what's acceptable in our families, whatever. Those layers build up, and it's like we start to feel like those parts of us are really monstrous. And,
Mm.
we all have messy stuff where it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
we all have the stuff in the 12th house where it's like, oh, actually, I really do just need to work on that because that's like actually me being uncharitable or like whatever. But there's
Yeah.
also this other stuff that is just so gunked up with these other, 12th house things, guilt, shame, fear, that it takes going through those layers to really find what's underneath it. But yeah, that's painful work to do. Like it
Mhm.
really is not to be taken lightly. Like you need a lot of support to be doing work like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so much gets kind of like put in the 12th house, I think, that we don't really want to face or that we just do not have the tools to face at a time, at a
Hmm.
certain time. Like I'm never gonna shame anyone for being like, I just cannot carry the weight of this grief right now. I have a life to live. Like I have bills to pay.
Yep.
Like things go to the 12th house to kind of wait for us to be ready to encounter them again. And you know, yeah, there's a lot to be said for that. And I do think, you know, things can arrive in the 12th house, land there, whether we kind of shove them there or they are put there in our childhood, whatever. But I think we will always reach capacity there at some point, and
Yeah.
those things will start to spill out into our lives. And I think that's where we start to see, especially like the self-sabotage signification of the 12th house. It's like when those things kind of come for you because you have been neglecting them for so long, um, those things will demand your attention at some point, which is again why it's a good idea to be like, go in there yourself, like
Yeah.
choose to
Clean
engage the
house.
trust, clean house because like it's gonna come out at some point, and you might as well play a role in when that happens and where that happens, so it doesn't just kind of explode into your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I often think about the 12th house, and I feel like you might have described it to me this way too when I got my consultation with you, and I was like, ah, yes, the 12th house specialist agrees. Is that like it's the things that we kind of put on those like in those boxes and we like shove them away in like the recesses of our mind and our hearts. We're like, I'll deal with this later, I'll deal with this later. And then we get an activation to the 12th house or something like that. And those boxes start flying off the shelf and hitting us in the face. And it's like, it's
Mhm.
time to deal with all this stuff that's piled up that you haven't addressed. And I think that is, it can feel very overwhelming as a result of that because it's not just, oh, this one little thing that I might need to work on or this one little thing that has been repressed and is now asking to be, looked at. It's oftentimes a lot of stuff all at once and the ways in which it's interconnected.
Yeah.
And the other thing that you were saying that made me think about aspects between houses because this is something that I am like I'm really on one about this right now. I'm about to release like a whole guidebook on the houses that talks about this stuff. And I was rewriting my 12th house piece yesterday and I was thinking about the trine from the 8th house to the 12th house. And what you said spoke so perfectly to this, right? Is like the 8th house is the house of inheritances, and it is an overcoming trine to the 12th house, meaning it kind of has this seamless but also overwhelming influence on the topics that we find in the 12th, where they flow into there, but it's almost like you don't have to try. Like you're not making any of this happen, it just goes, right? And so if you're inheriting these beliefs, like you said, about, oh, maybe you're too emotional, right? That can pull you into the 12th house and that can repress that quality. And in another way, it's almost like, it's how we inherit trauma. And like that is a whole other thing too, right? That can bring us into the 12th house, where I was reading about this study about men who had gone and were prisoners of war and their sons had like a higher mortality rate just because their parents were, and they were more predisposed to like mental health conditions and depression and like all of these things that we would normally ascribe to the 12th house. And like that aspect between the 8th and the 12th says like so much of this isn't our fault, even that it is actually coming from something else, someone else, and that these inheritances were not chosen, were not asked for. And also, they are ours to deal with and they are ours to make peace with and make sense of as much as we possibly can. And that's why I feel like doing the quote unquote 12th house work is so important to kind of untangle those things and to make sure that the inheritances that you are passing on, if you choose to have children or something like that, aren't impacting the next generation the way that those impacted you. And you don't get to make those types of changes if you aren't engaging with your 12th house.
I'm just big nodding along. This is so huge. And you know, like don't even get me started on like the grand trine between 8th, 12th, and 4th. I
We
know
could
the
talk
4th
about it
house is
all
an
day.
angular house. I know it's an angular house, but it is
It's
an
a dark
honorary
house.
dark house. I don't care. Like
I
it
agree.
just is. They all
1000%.
well, right. And like that's even something interesting to look at, like extending the like element modality contrast between the 12th and 1st. Like just look at the element of your rising sign and then look at the element of your 12th, 8th, and 4th whole sign houses. There's a vibe. You will begin to see a pattern. And even the 4th house brings in this idea of like origins, ancestry, where you came
Mhm.
from. It's a big, I'm like doing this like windmill thing with my
Yeah,
hands,
no, but
just
it's
with the
completely
feeling of
that.
it.
It's
You
like
know what I mean?
it's like a circuit. They
Yes.
all feed into each other. What happens in the fourth influences the eighth, and the eighth influences the 12th, and the 12th influences the fourth, and then they gotta go back around in this weird, yeah, this is like I'm really, really on one about this in my brain and haven't had
Yeah.
anyone to talk about it with, as you can tell. So I'm just bursting at the seams as you bring up the fourth house as honorary dark house because I completely agree. It's where the sun travels through at midnight, the darkest time of day. It is inherently private. It is inherently secretive. It is inherently hidden, just like the 12th and 8th are. And so there's
Yes.
this quality to all of them, and the trines betwixt them also highlight this nature, right? But yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That just really soothed my soul a little bit to have someone say it
No,
back at me.
I'm so glad that you're on one about this because this I think about this all the time and I tell that to clients all the time. It just is. It's an honorary dark house. And I think, you know, there's something about like that grand trine, the trines between those three houses, the way they flow into each other that feels so natural and automatic. Like it can feel kind of overwhelming too. Like, who am
Mhm.
I to stop this current? Like, who am I to like break the wheel or like break these patterns? Like, you're asking a lot of yourself when you decide to really address some of these patterns or some of these
Yep,
inherited stories or traumas, etc. So it's like, you know, really don't take this lightly and like give yourself some credit too. You know, I
absolutely.
think something that I try to be kind of careful about is, you know, I try as much as I can with my 12th house work and my clients to like remind folks of their agency in these
Mm,
situations and remind folks that like you can engage these patterns, like you can learn about yourself, you can face yourself. And also, I'm never going to be one to be like, if you just like think a lot more positive, your 12th house will be fine. And like you can, you know, this stuff is real. This stuff extends forward and backward in time. Like go easy on yourself and have grace for yourself as you engage these things because it is really serious. And also it's possible.
yeah,
So it's an
yeah.
interesting balance to strike, you know.
It is, yeah. And I think about, those trines are like an aspect that remove hindrances, right? So that kind of flowing nature. It's almost like trying to stop a current from just going from one
Yes.
place to the next. It's like you have to build a dam there. That's
Hmm.
hard work. That's laborious. That requires effort. And trines aren't are aspects that kind of get you off the couch and get you moving, like they are inherently the ones that are like, it's just easier to let it keep going the way it's going rather than trying to stop and change and reroute and redirect the way that things are flowing. So it is inherently going to feel more challenging to disentangle yourself from those inherited patterns, to change the family structure, to do all of these things that the fourth, eighth, 12th trines are speaking to. And like you said, it is still possible. Like you can build a dam, you can do these things, but it isn't necessarily going to feel like a seamless, easy process because it's not. And I think about how the 12th is the joy of Saturn and it squares the joy of the sun and the joy of the moon, right? So it's like to get back to the light, it's actually requires a lot of effort and you have obstacles to overcome to be able to get back to a place of agency, to get back to a place of illumination, of clarity. And also, it can be done because squares are of the nature of Mars. It's about taking action, it's about doing something. So even if there are obstacles there, it's still a catalyst for action, and it can bring you out of the 12th and into these places and into these relationships with the luminaries, which are life supporting planets, right? They are generative in nature. So it's built into the chart that you can change these things and that you can come out of the 12th and meet the luminaries where they are. But it's effortful.
It is. It is. And just thinking about the joy of Saturn too is like things that are Saturnian in nature, like tend to really benefit from your persistence and like from your diligence and from
Yep.
being like, I'm gonna pace myself and I'm gonna do this incrementally, but I'm not going to quit. Like I'm not going to give up. And I think this kind of work, this 12th house work, this dark house work, it takes that persistence and like and again, like finding a way to do this sustainably, like working smarter, not harder, kind of like you
Mm-hmm.
said, you can't just like go in with boxing gloves and like I'm gonna brute force my ancestral patterns or like my own self-sabotage. But like you can try, like
Try.
you could like try it out and see what happens. But you know, it takes that persistence and like that patience too.
Hmm.
There's a very specific kind of like when I think of like compassion or grace, I think of like the benefics, you know, of
Yeah.
course. Like those are very benefic things, but there's a kind of like, and I think it's just commitment that comes from Saturn that can also feel loving, that can also feel like self-respect to like keep
Yep.
showing up for yourself, keep doing that even when it does not feel like the reward is there yet, the result is not there yet. It's that just feels like that Saturn connection to the 12th of like keep showing up to this work, keep showing up for yourself, not with brute force, not as a performance, but just like quietly, like consistently.
I love
Mm.
that. Yeah. That
Oh,
was,
Saturn.
yeah, a cruel mistress. And yet we love her and
We
them
do love
all the
her.
same.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that there is just that, like you said, it's showing up for yourself, right? It's doing the hard work that isn't easy and doesn't come with immediate payoff. You know, I think of Saturn in like skincare, for example, right? It's like
Oh,
you don't get the benefits. I know I'm speaking your
God
language.
damn it.
You don't get the benefits of washing your face every day right away. You know what I mean? You don't get the benefits of applying sunscreen when you're 20. You get them when you're 60, and all of a sudden you don't have sun damage, right? Or you've taken care of your vessel. You know, it's like that sustained commitment over a lifetime can make a really, really big difference towards your health, both physically, mentally, and otherwise. But it's only through continuing to show up for the thing, whatever it may be. And with the 12th house, it's continuing to show up for your mental health. It's continuing to show up for rest, even when we live in a society that is constantly telling us that we just have to keep pushing and working, and there's no time for grief, and there's no time for this, there's no time for rest, right? It's like Saturn actually says that it's essential and that we need it to be able to sustain the effort to show up and do all of these things. And I feel like that's part of this is like you have to take a good hard look at all the ways in which you can care for yourself in the 12th house and choose those regularly, repeatedly for years and years and years. And then there will hopefully be a day where going into the 12th house isn't as scary. And I think about that a lot with Saturn. It's like hard stuff doesn't stop being hard the older you get. I literally posted something about this the other day.
I was going to bring up your post about this. Please go
Yeah,
ahead.
it's it's like I think about Saturn as heartbreak, right? And the first time you get your heart broken, you feel like you're just gonna die, like you're just gonna pass out on the couch from a broken heart. It feels like you're bleeding out of your body because you're so hurt, right? And then the second time you get your heart broken, it's like, wow, like this really sucks, and maybe even worse than the first time because maybe you loved this person more, right? Or maybe you spent longer together, any number of reasons. But because you've been through it before, you know you're going to get through it again. You know that there's going to be a time where you do feel better because you've experienced it. The third time you get your heart broken, if there's a third time, I hope there's not, but if there is, you know, like then you get to that point and you're like, okay, now I've done this rodeo several times and it's gonna hurt and it's gonna suck. And I know that I have to keep showing up for myself. I have to keep pouring that love that I was pouring into this other person into myself. And one day I am gonna wake up and the pain might be there, but it's gonna be a little bit less there. And the day after that, it's gonna be a little bit less there. And because you have this experience and this perspective that can only come from time and going through these things, you're able to do Saturn better. And I think ideally, as you age, you're able to do your 12th house better too. You know, we talk about the 12th house perfection year as like 23. Nobody likes you when you're 23, per Blink 182. But we don't talk about the other 12th house perfection years, ironically. And I think that's so funny. It's like you have the one when you're a child and you have no agency. Then you have the one where you're entering into adulthood and you're trying to make sense of your life. And that's the one that gets all the focus. Because I think oftentimes it's maybe not the hardest one, but it's the one that hits the most because
Yep.
you feel it for the first time in this new way, you know? And the next time around, it's a little bit, maybe not easier, but like you've been through it before. You've been here. You know this space. You've been in the goo in a
Hmm.
conscious way. And I think that that kind of alleviates maybe a little bit of the intensity. And that is the blessing of Saturn. It doesn't stop being hard. You just get better at doing hard stuff.
Absolutely. That was one of my biggest takeaways from my Saturn return was like, I don't think that like time is healing me necessarily. Like I don't think my burdens are not getting lighter. I'm just getting stronger. Like I just have more
Mm,
endurance. And that sounds like I just want to name how depressing that sounds. It does sound kind of depressing to just be like
yeah.
things don't get easier, you just get tougher. But you really do. And like functionally like it does kind of get easier. And what happens is you have more space inside you. So,
Hmm.
like, I had that experience hugely in my Saturn return, where it's like for a while leading up to my Saturn return, I felt that like all that was inside me was this like grief and pain. And as I grew, with Saturn, it's like the space inside me grew. So there was enough
Hmm.
space for also joy, also pleasure, also hope. And I feel like that's very much we see that Saturnian quality reflected in the 12th house as well. It does get easier over time. You grow more space inside you over time.
I love
And
that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me of like when you first start going to the gym, you know, and you do like you lift weights for the first time and you get so sore and you're like, oh my God. Like, and then a year later, you can lift much heavier weights. You have this resilience that has been built up by time, by consistency, by effort and toil, right? It's by putting in the work that you now have a greater capacity for something that is still arguably hard, right? But you've
Mhm.
kind of conditioned yourself to it. And it is depressing in a way to think that we have to condition ourselves to pain and heartache and difficulty. And also, that is life. You don't get the benefics without the malefics. We don't get to delete Mars and Saturn out of the sky. We're all going to deal with shit at some point, and learning how to deal with it better in the ways that we can is ultimately part of what makes life easier. Because if you get knocked down every single time you have a malefic transit, you're just going to be on the floor forever, right? So
Yeah,
you have to kind of learn that resilience. And I think that's part of even just like your perfection years. Like you go through the wheel and you gain more experience, you gain more time, right? Like that's just living your life. And yeah, I think that's just the hard fought for Saturnian blessing, if we can call it that.
truly. Truly it is. And it's like it's genuinely like an act of self-love and
Hmm.
self-respect, I think, to like to go into your 12th house and do this work. It like at the end of the day, the same way the 12th house is about surrender, like I think it is also radical self-acceptance. And like
Yeah.
that, nothing will like build your endurance faster and your resilience faster than being like, I'm going to go into this place inside myself. And no matter what I find, I'm going to stay with it and I'm going to stay with myself. And like, that'll make you strong real fast.
I love that. And if you want to go into your 12th house and you want to do the 12th house work, might I recommend doing, in particular, a way making through the 12th house consult with Joe because you have this beautiful way of bringing the chart alive, making the planets characters in a story that makes it feel accessible, especially when you're talking about such intense, challenging themes. Like a lot of people don't want to sign up for a reading about grief and pain and loss, but
Yeah.
when it's you, it's like you make it feel like it's like an adventure that you're going on into the inner depths and caverns of your soul. And it feels like all of a sudden, oh, I can find my way through this really dark place because someone else is holding up the light for me. And yeah, I just can't recommend your 12th house stuff enough. Do you have any kind of final thoughts on the 12th house that you want to make sure we get to in this episode?
I think we covered so much. I think we covered the main things. I have like such 12th house brain too. I'm like funneling all my 12th house thoughts into like creating these guidebooks. But with waymaking, for just the briefest description I can give is
Please
like
do.
waymaking is about using these good solid bones of traditional astrology as building blocks for story. And not necessarily as in like I make up a D&D campaign based on your chart, although that would be really cool. It's less that and it's more about using storytelling as like imaginal navigation in this place where like your normal navigation does not work. It's too liminal.
Mm,
It's too wild and mysterious in there. And storytelling, fictionalizing, like getting hyper subjective with like how your 12th house feels to you, how that shows up in images, allows storytelling to be kind of a buffer between you and the stuff that is really painful. It's a way to engage with all these themes we've been talking about and the way the 12th house like is bad and does suck, but it in a way that is not kind of like again going in with brute force or being like time
yeah.
to dig for trauma. Like it's a gentler way to keep your agency, to still face the things, but make it a little bit easier on yourself. And it tends to be really effective too, and also just really nourishing. Like
Yeah.
stories are so important. Like we talk a lot about like energetic hygiene or spiritual hygiene. There's also like imaginal hygiene. Like what kinds of things do you feed your imagination and like how can that be a part of like your wholeness and your wellness overall too? And so it's like that's the way waymaking approaches this 12th house stuff is with story, with fiction, with imagery, and that kind of richness. So you can be with that stuff without it just being feeling so incredibly painful and hard.
I
So
feel
just
like
wanted to throw that in there too.
no, I'm like now we need to do an entire episode on waymaking. So let us know if you guys want that because I might have Joe
Yeah,
back if she is welcome to come back or if she wants to come back.
yeah.
But
Let us
thank
know.
you. Yeah, let us know. We want to know. But thank you
Yeah.
for coming on. This was a delightful conversation about a not so delightful place. And I just want to say, keep your eyes peeled for Joe's 12th house guidebook because that should be coming out hopefully soon. We are both hinging our bets on getting out our guidebook. And we are in the midst of a Mercury retrograde right now. So we're both like, Mercury willing, both our guidebooks may or may not be out on August 20th.
Yes.
So keep your eyes peeled for Joe's and keep your eyes peeled for mine. Mine's on the houses and Joe's is on specifically the 12th house. And hopefully this got so much excitement kind of built up within you to go deeper into this place because even if it is hard and even if it is scary, it is an integral part of you. It is an important part of you. And it is one that you will be better off for if you face it and go into it and engage with it intentionally. So, thank you for
Mm.
coming on.
Thank you
So
so much for
so
having
happy to have
me.
you.
Oh my God, I'm so excited for your guidebook. I
Thank
cannot
you.
wait,
I'm excited
genuinely.
for yours. No,
Thanks.
truly. Thanks for the hype and thank you guys for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, review, do all the things that you know help these shows grow because it means a lot to me and it will ensure that the show is around for a long time to come. Thank you for listening, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.